Hey, Sean.
Yes, sir, Howard Doss.
We're still here at CrimeCon, man.
We are still at CrimeCon, having a great time.
Las
Again,
Vegas.
sounds repetitive, man. Las Vegas, having a great time. Amazing group of people that have shown up for this thing. And we've been really fortunate, not just talking to people about the podcast, of course, the questions about Live PD, but we've come across some people with some amazing stories.
Absolutely. I've got an amazing story for you.
Okay?
You and I know how important family is, right?
Absolutely.
Our kids, our parents. We've been kind of, I guess, I hate to use this term, but I'm going to do it anyway. We have been fortunate enough or blessed enough to have great parents.
That is true.
So imagine you're a kid and you're like, I don't know, prepubescent, maybe 11, 12 years old, and you find out that your mom's dead.
Horrible.
Yeah.
Absolutely horrible.
And then, but worse than that, you know that your dad killed her,
Unimaginable.
but nobody believes you. That's our story today. Our guest is Collier Landry. Collier, glad to have you.
Glad to be here, guys.
Glad to have you here. So, obviously, quite the story. We'll get in and chat with. I'm going to bring it up to speed on how we even got to have you here. This was not a planned deal until less than 24 hours ago.
Yeah.
We had guests lined up that we were going to talk to while we were here at CrimeCon. And you had just, I'd seen you, man. Listen, and I mean this in the best way. You kind of stand out walking around here at CrimeCon, and there are a lot of females here at this thing. So even just there's not as many males, and you're kind of and Howard just spilled whiskey all over the table. But you're a bigger guy. You've got you got the longer hair. You've had pulled back in the ponytail. You've got this little LA vibe swag to you. With your jewelry, the tattoos, the stuff that you stand out in the crowd. And I mean that in the best way. You do. I mean, for other guys to even, take notice of you, I mean that in the best way. But you had ventured over to our table there, and I think you started talking with Howard first and one of the other ladies that was working our table. Yeah. And I was ventured off doing something else and came back over, and I'd seen you, over the weekend, and then, man, here you were at our table. And Howard's like, man, this guy's got a story.
Hell yeah, he's got a story. He started. Who was the guy you were with that came up and introduced you?
Stephen Cohen. So he's with Chris Hansen.
Yeah.
And I interviewed Chris on my podcast last week. And he saw me in the New York Post in February. They did an article about the podcast about me.
Uh-huh.
And then he hit me up on LinkedIn. And so that's how I met him. And then it's the first time I've actually met him in person. I talked to him a bunch on the phone. But and then he was like, and I swore he told me about your podcast, but he didn't. But he told me about these guys from the Midwest or a little west of the Midwest, and they drink whiskey and they talk about true crime. And I was like, oh, this must be the guys. But then it wasn't. But he was like, well, I don't know what I was talking about. I was like, whatever. I'm
Collier,
they're super cool.
We are the guys. We are the guys. Whoever else he was talking about, those are like the little brothers, man. We are the guys.
You are the guys, yeah.
We are the guys.
You look like the guys.
Yeah,
they look like the guys. They're right in the middle here. They've got to be the guys, but then...
You should have seen our in-person podcast. It was huge.
It did well. It did well.
Well, I saw you guys on stage, and I was wondering, who are these
They're
guys?
drinking whiskey up
who
here.
Who are these guys? And people were interested. And I'm like, and I hear the accents, and I'm kind of like, oh, those are my people. But I'm like, what are they doing here? And then... you were holding court on the left side of the table.
Yeah.
And then you were in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, okay, so he looks like, I literally thought, he looks like the cop, like the ex-Fed. But I don't know. I mean, I'm just looking at, I don't even know who you are. And then I'm like, you look like the producer. And then there was another guy who was on the right. I can't remember him, but I remembered you two.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, this looks like a little racket they got going on. It was pretty cool.
It worked. It worked. Yeah, that was Gil Carrillo that we had up there. He was actually a retired L.A. County Sheriff's Department homicide guy. He was one of the guys that kind of busted the Night Stalker case.
Oh, that's cool.
So that's who he was. That's his. He investigated hundreds. I think 700-800 murders during his time there in L.A.
County. You know what
County.
we got him liquored up.
We did. We got him. He's a wine guy. We got him drinking whiskey up there.
We gave him some barrel-proof bourbon. He was like, whew, got a little buzz at the end. But we like to drink on here.
We do.
And we're going to continue with drinking some Old Elk.
Yes, we are. We are drinking that Old Elk that's got our Coptales and Coptales logo on it with a pretty little character
And
picture
we
of
got
us.
quite a bit on the.
Yeah, and half the bottle spilled on the table now.
Yeah, sorry
so
about that.
I guess you
That
could probably
cries,
like put this up and just suck
gonna
it out
make-
of there, like a
I'm gonna make a
survival
tea
tactic.
bag,
You
you
know
know?
those survival tactics, like when you're lost in the desert, you can soak the moisture up through
I think
clothing
that's
or something.
drinking urine, dude.
Jason's our outdoorsman here. Does that sound right, Jason? Yeah, Jason says it would work, so I can
Just suck
survive.
on your dirty T-shirt.
So
like
any of you guys get
Tarkington.
lost in the desert, take whiskey, spill it into a terrible looking table cover from Bally's, and you could survive.
We are
All
in
right,
the desert.
but so anyway, so
Collier's not drinking that.
Collier's not drinking, man.
No, I quit drinking during the pandemic, but I am going to do my little CBD THC combo edibles and join you guys.
Get your
Absolutely.
thing going, man. I
Whatever
like this. This
relaxes
is.
you.
We've had a guy that we've interviewed before that smoked blunts during the whole
He
time.
was. I mean,
he was
he was just
smoking blunts.
ripping
So
them.
this is. But we've never had anybody hit the gummy. So man, this
Yeah.
is a first right here.
Yeah,
but going back
absolutely.
to talking with Collier there at when I walked up, it just kind of says, hey, those are beautiful, by the way.
Yeah, it's like cool little I mean, this is California, man.
Yeah, it's
This is- they
California.
market it. It's just
It's
what
like-
they do.
It's marketing to kids. That's candy, dude.
Hey, what's that? You're just a big kid, man.
California's real progressive. They want to get all the kids on the weed.
But they want to get everybody on the weed.
The weed.
Okay, so as we were saying, so it just says, hey, I think your exact words were, my father killed my mom, and I was a cop for 25 years, and unfortunately, I've been on those type of scenes and I've heard these things, and I was like, okay, and then you and obviously during here in the podcast we'll go into the full details, but you start laying out some of the details, and I don't know, 30 seconds into it, I'm like, wait a minute, I think I might know this story. And as you continue on, I think Howard drops that your father was a doctor. And again, I'm not giving anything away ahead of time, but the show Forensic Files, which I had never watched until within the past year, first time I started watching it. And as you literally briefly are kind of laying out some just little bits from the story, I'm like, was this on Forensic Files? And you're like, yes, that's me. I was the kid that testified in this. And I'm just like, holy shit, one of the handful of episodes I have ever seen happens to be this one. And I don't want to call it a fluke deal, but just the fact that here we are talking a show I just watched recently.
Serendipitous,
There
to
you go.
say the
Serendipitous.
least.
Well, the episode is called Foundation of Lies, and it's like top 10 in Forensic Files. I'm actually in the book that's coming out about Forensic Files later on this year. They interviewed me because I'm just like, what? Like, this is like a really popular episode. But I told you I had a funny story about that because you said you were watching it with your girlfriend or wife,
my wife, yes.
and you just happened to see it. And I saw the episode. I've never actually seen the whole episode, but I was on a date in 2004 in LA. I go over to this girl's house, and gorgeous girl, and we're flipping through the channels, sitting on her couch, after, post-coital, I guess, whatever. And she's like, flipping through, and there's me on the witness stand, and I see it, and I'm just like, oh, shit.
Does she
And she
recognize
flips
you
through-
as a kid?
Flips through, past, and she goes, and she stops, and she looks over at me, and then she flips the channel back about 3 channels and looks, and I'm just like,
Hey,
because I got these blue eyes, so it's really
you
hard
do,
to
yeah.
mistake.
And there's 2 of them.
And there's 2 of them, and they're like, and I'm on the witness stand, like, blah, 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 as the picture that I showed you guys, and I was just like, yeah. And the thing is when I moved to Los Angeles, like, I left my small town of Mansfield, Ohio. I was 18. I went to music school. I dropped out of music school after about 2.5 years, and I moved to the West Coast. I moved to LA because I wanted, no money, just like, I'm going to go start off in a new place with where the talent goes, right? Where you got to be like cream of the crop. And I'm going to go try to make it where nobody's going to know a fucking thing about my story, because the biggest thing for me, can I curse on this podcast?
absolutely, you can cuss all
We
you
already
want.
Fantastic,
did,
because it's
so
very
we're
hard
good.
for me not to.
You're doing fucking gummies on here,
Yeah,
man. You can
oh, yeah, I
you
got
can curse.
to
We
take
drink
it.
whiskey.
Boom, boom, boom. There we go. Salud.
All right,
Salud.
so-
Cheers.
I've never cheersed a gummy before. That's quite interesting. I'll lick the tablecloth now.
So I go. I was like, I don't want to leave. The problem is growing up in a small town where this happens, and it was just like the largest. This was definitely the largest criminal case in Central Ohio history.
Sure.
But it was also like the second largest murder trial in Ohio history, period. Behind the Dr. Sam Shepard case, which was made into the movie The Fugitive, by the way, starring Harrison Ford.
Yes.
Tommy Lee Jones. Anyways, I got I'm a movie guy, so
You know it well.
I work in the business, so I gotta
I
say,
like
hey,
the
look,
Wesley
there's a
Snipes
nice low
version.
fill coming from overhead. I love all this, but I was like, I don't want people to know my story because they did, and everybody I walk in the room or in Ohio, I'm like, oh, that's the guy, that's the kid, and that's a lot to deal with. So I was like, I'm gonna come out to a place where nobody knows the fuck who I am, and over the years as working, people knew basically the basics. Okay, yeah, Collier, my dad killed my mom when I was a kid. That's it. Like, I never really got into it. And I mean, I'm talking like girls I dated a girl for 6 years, She knew a little bit about the story, but we never really got into it because it was like, I wanted people to discover who I am. And I had seen a movie called American History X in 1999.
Phenomenal movie. Edward
Top
Norton
5
Jr.
all time.
Fantastic movie. It's one of not
Edward
to veer
Norton.
off. Yeah, Ed Norton, just amazing. It's one of those deals that I watched it growing up, type of deal when it came back out. And when my kids got to the age where I thought it was appropriate for them to watch, I made them watch it.
That
just because of
scene is one of the most
it's one of the
horrible.
most well-known scenes in all of the film industry. I think that
100%.
curb scene. Yeah, I mean, it really is. Sorry,
And
fantastic
I left
movie.
that film, and I was like, whoever made that film understands the consequences of violence, because I, from age 11 on, was absolutely, and now, like I was saying yesterday, and I tell people it's very in fashion to like care about victims and what's going on, and we're very empathetic and we all that. That wasn't the case 25 years ago.
Let's say, how old are you now?
I'm 44.
Okay.
So I'm actually literally the age that my mother was when she was murdered. So that was a big deal, turning 44 a couple months ago. And also today, May 1st, 2022, is my father's 79th birthday, and he is still incarcerated.
Will he be there forever?
I don't know.
Okay.
I mean, he's up for parole again in like 3 years.
All right.
Well, we'll get into that in a second. But I see this film, American History X. I go, whoever did this understands the consequences of violence, because I am passionate about, like, look, it's judged, bad guy goes to jail, victim is dead, gavel hits, state gets this restitution, and we say next. We never look at the consequence of violence, the ancillary victims, the non-combat PTSD. We never examined that. I was very passionate about that. So I was like, this person gets this. Flash forward 10 years later, I'm at my place in Hollywood. My girlfriend comes in at the time. She goes, this guy wants to photograph me for a coffee table book. He's a movie producer. She was a model, obviously. And it's like, he's
Yeah,
done a bunch of
obviously.
movies,
Look at you.
Yeah.
You
Well,
date
I
models.
was
Come
gonna
on
say,
now,
no,
obviously.
no.
All of our
I mean
girlfriends
it
are
like,
models as
I
well,
mean, like that's why you wanted the
obviously.
photographer. That's why I mean, like, in context. But so she says, he's done a bunch of movies. I was like, okay, what are they? And she's like, Booty Call, 11/14, Have It Just starts naming all these movies. And she says, American History. I said, American History X? And she goes, yeah. I was like, get him over to our house. So me and the dude, we become friends. His name is John Morrissey. And a couple years later, he and I are talking, and he's like, he wanted to do some sort of silly project. And I was like, what you need to do is this project that I have. And I was like, I want to do a docu-series about the consequences of violence in America and examine all these things that we don't look at. And here's the best news. I own the rights to the pilot. And I gave him a book of all these newspaper articles that were collected from me as a kid that somebody gave to me when I was 18 about the whole case, from when my mother went missing to when my father was convicted for like his first to turn of the millennium, all this stuff, his parole, looking back on the case, all these things. And he was just like, he read it and he called me the next day. He goes, are you fucking shitting me?
This is you.
This is you? Like, I didn't know this. And I was like, well, yeah. I was like, nobody knows this. Like, and he goes, I have a friend who I just did a feature film with like Channing Tatum and Joey Gordon-Levitt and Anne Hathaway, but she's a documentary filmmaker. She's won 2 Academy Awards. I bet you she'd be interested in this. And then over the next 5, 6, 7 years, we developed what is now known on Investigation Discovery as A Murder in Mansfield.
Wow. Well, let's talk about A Murder in Mansfield.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that day that all this started.
Yeah. So when I was 11 years old on New Year's Eve, 1989, I awoke in the middle of the night to like the sound of 2 loud thuds and like a scream. So the scream is what woke me up, and then I heard these thuds, and they were about like 60 to 90 seconds apart. And then I hear my father muttering, or a male voice muttering. I'm terrified, laying in the bed. I'm looking at my Batman clock on the wall, and it says like 3:18 a.m. And I'm laying there, and I hear these footsteps like slowly walk down the hall. And as a child, I slept with my door open. And I'm laying like this, for those that are watching this, and I can see out of my peripheral vision, and I see these footsteps, these 2 feet in my doorway. And I'm just like,
What's going on?
don't look up. Because, now I realize that if I looked up, look, it's not difficult to just make the hole a little bit bigger. But I wouldn't be here today. No fucking way. And the footsteps left. I went back to sleep. I woke up like super early that morning. I ran to my mother's bedroom. I start scavenging the sheets, looking for blood, all this stuff. The bed's a mess, and I'm just like, what is going on? I come downstairs. My father is sitting on the couch, wrapped in a towel. He had just taken a shower. I said, where is my mother? And he looks at me and he goes, well, Collier, Mommy took a little vacation. Mommy took a little vacation, Collier. And then he proceeds to launch into this whole, and I'm like, I, of course, do not believe him.
Sure.
And because my mother had never left me before, so I was always her constant companion. And they were going through a divorce. He had a mistress who was pregnant, which I didn't know at the time she was pregnant. But
And that's what I was getting. Sorry to cut you off there. I was going to ask. Leading up until that night, were there fights between your mom and dad? Whether it be physical or just heavy arguments, that you were hearing, stuff like that.
So my father was always very abusive, and he had one of those raging tempers, like could just, boom, go off on a split second. But my father was not around a lot. He was a doctor. He worked a lot. And as I came to find out, he had all these girlfriends. So he was leading like these dual lives. And I hardly ever saw my dad. I would sometimes, like, our bonding thing was I would go with him to make his rounds to the hospital, which I loved doing. I loved talking. I would go and sing and tap dance for the the patients and all this stuff. And I was a little performer. And I would, go skiing with him on ski trips. But then even then he would be like, oh, I'll come back to the room. And then he would disappear. Off. And I would see him with someone. I'd be like, what's going on? As I started getting older, right? That was really the extent of our relationship. And other than that, he was really abusive to me.
All right, I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm going to be a nursing profiler here because I'm a nurse, and I know what type of doctor was he?
He was an osteopath. Really? So, I guess it's like a GP.
Yeah, so, okay, yeah. Those guys do kind of fly off the handle a lot. They're less important than they think they should be, and so they get a little bit pissed off whenever you kind of, it's like, you just pat them on the head and keep going.
You just pat them on the head and they keep going? Yeah.
True power. Everybody knows this. The true power in hospitals is nurses.
The male nurses.
Yeah, absolutely. There's three of us.
That are bald. 3 of us in the nation.
Yeah, that's it. That's all. We control all of it. We call ourselves the triad.
So we gotta be nice to the triad.
Yeah, the triad. That'll get you. Okay, go ahead. Sorry about that.
It's all good. So yeah, he was very violent growing up. He would strike me with a belt, things like that. But he just had this fly off the handle. And the only time my mother left me, she went to Taiwan because my parents had adopted about 6 months before she was murdered a little girl from Taiwan. And when my mother was gone, because I couldn't travel because I was heavily asthmatic and I got really sick before we were supposed to leave, and I would have died on the airplane for sure. So my father wouldn't let me go. And while my mother was gone for 10 days, he was super abusive to me. He would chase me around the house, call me a stupid little fat boy because I was heavy as a kid because I was taking steroids for asthma and stuff, and I wasn't able to I was a little chubby little kid. Oh yeah, it was bad. It was it happened. I developed really bad asthma. I was 9 or 10, and then I was 11 at the time, and he would just chase me around and throw things at me and scream at me, and he was just so violent.
Just horrible.
Then he would just calm down and be like, I'm so sorry or whatever. I'm just like, oh my God, he was a nightmare. So I was terrified of my father. But on that morning, I'm looking at him, and I'm like, you motherfucker. I knew straight away. So he launches in his whole diatribe about we're not going to call the police, we're not going to call the FBI, and I'm like, as soon as he said the FBI, I'm like, I'm literally thinking in my head,
who says that?
Who the fuck says that? We're in Mansfield, Ohio. The FBI, yeah, they're going to come down here and send. James Bond is coming too.
Right.
Ridiculous. And I'm like, okay, something's fishy. And he had brought his mother the night before, which she was really close to my mother. They were best friends. And then, so she was going to apparently watch us, right? My sister and I. And so my father leaves. I had tucked phone numbers underneath this Garfield that I had, this little Santa Garfield. And I called my mother's friends and I said, look, I told them what happened. I said, you need to call the police. And so they did. 2 uniformed officers came out to the house, asked a couple of questions. I told them what happened. My grandmother was like following me, which is super weird. And so I couldn't say anything because she was going to, because when my father left, she's like, okay, you heard your father. We're not going to do this. We're not going to. I'm just like, what the fuck is going on? Like, why aren't you concerned that my mother is missing? Like, you love my mother.
This
like,
isn't normal.
This is not normal. Red flags everywhere. And they came out and I was like, they're not buying my story. What happened is the next day I'm like calling the friends, like what's happening with, oh, it's a missing persons case. I'm like, that's bullshit. Like somebody needs to get here. Like she's not missing, guys. She's dead. Like she's fucking dead.
Right.
And everybody's confused and but what happened was this one detective named David Messmore had seen the missing persons case. And like, look, it was like New Year's Day, 1990. So there's not a lot going on. It's a small town. It's not like it's LA where there's a bunch of shit happening. And he saw this and goes, oh, doctor's wife's missing, huh? And he just decided to come out to the house.
And Collier, was your mom, obviously with your father being a doctor, probably did financially decently well.
Sure.
Was she a stay-home mom?
She was a stay-at-home mom. She did his books.
Gotcha.
I never knew the extent, but my mother put my father through medical school. She took care of the family, well, before we were a family, but like she had a great job because she graduated from the University of Pennsylvania School of Dentistry, was a dental hygienist, making $25 an hour in the 1960s in Philadelphia. Like that's a lot of money.
Yeah, back then, absolutely.
So she was able to support him, which I found out when I was making the documentary. Anyways, so Messmore comes out, and my grandmother refuses to let him in the door or whatever, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like,
Come
on in, buddy. And, I'm a lot faster than a 70-year-old woman.
I would hope so.
And I grab him, and I pull him aside. And she's like tending to my sister or something. And I'm like, my mother is dead. Mm-hmm. This is what happened, blah, blah, blah. And he's just like, and what ended up happening is I went to school the next day, going back to like January 2nd or whatever. And I told the principal at the school, I said, you need to call down at the Mansfield Police Department and ask for this guy named Lieutenant David Messmore. You need to get him here.
Very specific.
You need to get him here. He came to my school. And I was, and that was my safety zone because I was away from my father. I was in school, and he, and I didn't have to worry about all of that. So I developed this rapport with Dave Messmore where he would come to school and I would be like, I told him the first day, I was like, I'm going to go home tonight. I'm going to run upstairs and I'm going to pull the bookcases out of the wall, the shelves, and look behind them and see if I can find my mother's body. I'm not even 12 years old at this time. These are the conversations I'm having with this man. I'm like, I know if she was going to leave, she would take this purse and she would bring this. I'm going to see if that purse is in the house. I'm going to be like, and he's like, who is this kid? I need to get him here. Like every day, I'm like wanting to talk to him. Like, what happens? What do you know? What do you this? And I unbeknownst to me, like he was catching shit from his captain because it's like, okay, you're now investigating a doctor in our small town. We don't do that. Like they got into a fight. She left. And he goes, yeah, but there's something about this kid. Like this kid won't leave me alone.
Yeah, he's adamant.
Like he's like this, and he's sharp. He's not like a dumb kid. He's so astute.
And he's got these blue eyes that just suck me in.
And there's 2 of them.
And what happened is my father was traveling back and forth to Erie, Pennsylvania, because he was going to start his new life there and a new practice focusing in occupational medicine, like workman's comp. I'm with my father. This is mid-January 1990. My father goes into the gas station to pay for gas. I see him in the thing. I open up the console, and I'm rummaging through his truck while watching him, and I find 2 Polaroid photographs. One is of a house, and the other one is of his girlfriend with her 2 kids sitting in front of a fireplace that was covered in plastic. So it struck me as being like a new fireplace.
Now, Collier, let me ask you this. At this point, you find these photos. Did you know your dad was, had a girlfriend? Was this something that discussions, arguments in the house, you'd met her before?
I had met his girl. So I had met his girlfriend the year previous. At Memorial Day, and he told me he was a patient. And then on Father's Day of 1989, we met up with her, and she gave us these remote control cars. And, she happened to show up at the suntan place. And, look who's here. It's Sherry. I mean, I even say this in the trial.
Remote control cars are cool, though.
Right? And so she gives us these remote control cars. And then my father asked me to lie to my mother about it. And what happened was I saw him tongue kiss this woman. And I'm like, well, that's not a friendly kiss. And I was 11.
It's
I'm
a
like,
very
that's
friendly
not a
kiss.
That's not a friendly friend of the family kiss type thing. And she had a ring on that I recognized as my mother's. I said, oh, my mommy has a ring like that. And she just kind of giggled or whatever. And it wasn't until that next day. We went out that night. I got really sick. The next morning, I was playing with a radio control car in the driveway, and I felt so guilty. I came in, I said, Mommy, I need you to sit down. I said, I think, Daddy asked me to lie to you. I think Daddy has a girlfriend. And she said, I don't appreciate you lying to me, but I do appreciate you telling me the truth and becoming honest about how you got the remote control car. And then she went inside, and I think she called my father and was like, that's it. Because they, unbeknownst to me, had an agreement. She knew about all the affairs. She even knew about this girlfriend and that she was pregnant. She was like, the moment you involve our son, it's fucking done. Like, that's it. You cross the line in the sand, we're done. And my father, being a narcissist and a sociopath, like, that was the line in the sand for him. And he's like, no. And I guess a lot of the discussions were, like, you're coming to Erie with me one way or another. And so when my father would be at the house, there were there's arguments and things like that, but he's pretty much stayed away. Now, during this time, so I find the picture of the house. I tell Messmore about this. Then, like, my father is like coming back from his going to Erie and come back late at night or whatever. And I remember he was like really sore and he had some scratches on his hands. And he was like, oh, can you rub my back with Ben Gay and stuff? And I was like, okay, that's super weird, but okay. And he was like, his muscles were all sore. And I was like, oh, this is really weird. And then he starts telling me about how, this is like January 20th, 21st, 1990. He starts telling me about how he's going to take me down to Florida for a medical conference. And my family every year would go to these medical conferences. But he's like, I'm going to take you to this medical conference. And that's when I came to school the next day. I said, you need to call Dave Messmore. He shows up at the place. And I say, Dave, I said, my father wants to take me to Florida for a medical conference. Dave, I have been able to swim since I was 4 years old. I'm going to drown in the Gulf of Mexico. You need to get me the fuck out of my house. I mean, I don't think I used the word fuck, but I was like, I need to get out of my house. And he realized that, like, literally this is the only witness to a potential murder, and this guy's going to kill his son. And my dad 100% was going to do that. Like, randomly, like, oh, and now all these clues, and I'm feeling this, and you're talking. So on the morning of January 24th, 1990, I woke up at 6 a.m. to these two strangers in my room, and they're literally like, you have 20 minutes to pack a bag and your things. We're leaving.
Was your dad there at the house when they showed up?
My father was gone already. He was up in Erie. My grandmother was hysterical. My sister, the yank. And basically, as they're removing us from the house, the entire house is full of cops, guys in, crime lab guys in white coats, all these devices looking for, I mean, it was full on.
How far is Erie, Pennsylvania from Mansfield, Ohio?
About 4.5, 5 hours.
Okay.
It's a ways.
All right.
So that night I go to a foster home. And that night I have like the worst asthma attack of my life. Like, I'm thinking I'm going to die. They take me to the hospital in the morning, and I go and I see a doctor friend who was friends with my mother and father and all this, and he gave me a breathing treatment and things like that. And then, it was weird because as they took me in the hospital, they ushered me past like the honor boxes, if you remember those, for those of you who actually read newspapers back in the day. And they like turned me as we were walking past it, like turned me. And I noted that, and I was like, fucking motherfucker. And then they sat down and they said, I got the breathing treatment, calm down, okay, he's all right. And they go, so Collier, we have something to tell you. Lieutenant Messmore found your mother. And then there was like this really long fucking pause, which was of course not a long pause, but this long drawn out pause. And I remember I was looking at like an electrical outlet because I knew it was coming. And she says, but I had this like fucking like small little spark of hope in my eyes. Or myself, I was like, maybe this is going to turn out okay. Maybe. And then she says, and she was dead. And the first thing that I said was that bastard. First thing that came out of my mouth.
You knew.
Well, the other thing is you knew before, but it wasn't reality until he spoke those words. And it still resonates with you, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, 33 years later, I mean, it's your mom.
You only get one.
Yeah, 32 years and change. This was January 25th, 1990. And that's just when, like, I mean, I was already like man on fire, but that was like, oh, gloves are off. This is a fucking street fight. And I had no idea how difficult the shit was about ready to get, but that's when shit got real. So I was in the foster care system, and the thing is that my mother's side of the family didn't want anything to do with me because I looked like my father. Literally what they said to me verbatim. My father's side of the family didn't want anything to do with me because, well, you put your...
You were against your
grandma.
father.
I
Yeah.
literally went and testified in front of the grand jury, secured his indictment. I remember the woman who was in charge of the grand jury used to be the principal at my school. And I just remember her saying after that, like, your mother would be so proud of you. And then, like, it's the whole, like, case, and it's just months drawn out. And, you know, I had talked to Dave Messmore several times, and I had, you know, developed a real rapport with him because, like, he was sort of my saving grace, right? He's the only person to believe me.
The cop was the hero.
He was the fucking hero,
Still
man. The
never
cop was the hero. And, you know, it was, you know, it was like 5 months of just me in foster care and just like, what the fuck is going to happen to my life? Where am I going? And the foster care situation was not good.
That's tough. It is.
And that was
For
a
any
long
kid
time
that's in
ago,
the
yeah.
system, it's
And
tough.
I have no family, and I have the one person that was my support system in the world was dead. She ain't coming back, right? And I remember
Did your sister end up there as well?
my sister was there in foster care with me, and the people who would take us into foster care, they wanted my sister. They didn't want me. So that was their agenda.
We always wanted a girl.
And my mother was trying to help them get a baby from Taiwan. And so then they were like, oh, but we'd rather have her. They used to babysit her all the time. So they were like primed to do that. I mean, that's why they took us. And over that 5 months, and I remember like I talked to the prosecutors and everything, and they were like, you know, you don't need to testify. I'm like, this is where it fucking ends. This is the fucking battlefield, man. Are you kidding me? Like, I mean, I don't mean to equate it to war, but like, it is war. It's like, you know, it's like me, my father with his team of fucking lawyers, and me. And there's no evidence. Like, there's evidence. It's all circumstantial. Mm-hmm. And Dave Messmer was like, you know, you don't have to testify. Like, everybody's like, because everyone's reaction to the case is like, I can't believe they made you testify. I'm like, no, don't get it twisted. They were like, you don't have to testify.
You wanted to.
And I'm like, you're fucking out of your minds. Like, they're over my dead body. I'm not testifying. Like, I am going to make sure that I do my best for justice for my mother. Like, you know, and there's like something that's really crazy that I read. Like, somebody sent me on Instagram a couple weeks ago. So people who have been through like seemingly like defied seemingly insurmountable odds and been through such extreme tragedy have a fire inside them that is almost inextinguishable. And that is 100% right. And it's driven me ever since then. I mean, still to this day.
No, you have to have it, you know, because you either...
Sorry, I'm going to get emotional.
No, you're good, dude.
absolutely.
As we said,
love that
it's
shit.
your mom, man. But you have to. I mean, and you know, you hear the old fight or flight, you know, that type of thing. But it's like you have to be that strong. You're being it for yourself and for your mom.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the big part about it. You have to do it for her. And you yourself obviously have to battle demons. It's tough, you know, as an 11-year-old kid, for any kid, any adult losing your mom. And that's a shitty thing for any reason, you know, natural causes. It's tough. As an 11-year-old kid, for that type of reason, it is 1,000 times worse. But just like you said, you have to have this fire, this drive in there for her.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm going to make this comment too. I can't. The energy you have now, and it takes one to know one. I can't imagine how much energy you have as an 11-year-old. I can't imagine how focused you were on this because my mind works similarly. So when you got on the stand and you started talking, you're very articulate now. I assume that you were articulate then, and you got your point across very well.
I mean, here's the thing: is like education was. Both my parents went to Penn. And they were not. They went to Penn. They were street kids from Philadelphia. They're from poor, you know, lower middle class families, you know, or upper lower class families. You know, they didn't come from money, but they got in because of education. Education was like a big deal. Like I was the kid that when school would end, got a week to fuck off, and then you go to summer school and go to art classes. And my mother was very involved in my education, as her father was with her education. And my father was very educated. He had when my father was arrested, he still had he had 14 years of education under his belt. He was still paying off his student loans, because he was they were very hungry for knowledge. And so I was the last person on the block to get the Nintendo. I had just gotten that the year for Christmas. My mom really bought it in front of me and said, "You're not getting this till Christmas." It was not something.
Duck Hunt had to wait.
Dude,
Duck Hunt had to wait.
Duck Hunt had to
Duck
wait.
Hunt, Contra, all that stuff.
Yeah, Contra, that's a good one, man. Yeah.
So the thing is that I have a really sharp memory. I don't know where I get it from. I just remember details. And I think that what it was is that my father did not realize that I was literally their son. And I remembered every detail. So I think maybe I testified for a day and a half. It was either a day and a half or 2.5 days. I say sometimes 2.5 days. It may have been a day and a half. Anyways, I just remember sitting on that witness stand, and he wouldn't look at me, and I'm just staring him down like a fucking gangster. Yeah, motherfucker. You're going to
I'm here.
This is us. We are squaring off right here. You have abused me my entire life, and now you have killed the one fucking person in my life that I love more than life itself. Mm-hmm. You have taken that from me, and you've destroyed my entire family. It's fucking payback time. And I was so good at remembering every single detail because on cross-examination, they were grilling me, and I didn't falter. You couldn't poke holes in my story because, as I tell everyone, the easiest thing to remember in life is the fucking truth.
That's what I was just saying. You can't poke holes if you're telling the truth. You're not going to waver.
People were like, oh, and there was all this stuff oh, you were coached on the witness stand. It was clear because you were so confident. I'm like, motherfucker. Yeah, I was confident on the witness stand because I'm telling the truth.
And you were there.
And I was there. I'm telling the truth. Maybe some detail gets skewed. Oh, I thought it was 3:18. It might have been 3 o'clock. Okay, sure. All these whatever. Those are that's bullshit.
That's defense attorneys trying to
that's conjecture you're trying to shove down my throat. The fact and I remember correcting the defense lawyers no, you're not going to say I was just, when I watched A Murder in Mansfield on the big screen in New York City when it premiered. I was I had never seen the trial tapes. I was oh my God, I have not changed. I'm just older.
You're just older.
I'm the same kid. I have the same manners. I have the same sardonic sense of humor that I got from my mother.
Too.
I have 2 blue eyes.
Couple new tattoos. Probably didn't have those when you were 11.
But I'm snarky with the prosecutor, with the defense attorneys. I'm mocking my father. Look who's here! It's Sherry, just because that was what he did.
Yeah.
And it's and people were laughing in the courtroom, but it wasn't doing it for attention. I was doing it to be I'm fuck this guy. You're not going to get away with this. And if you do, because this is the thing that people don't understand. And some people try to say, oh, when I talk about this, I'm profiting off my mother's. No, motherfucker, this happened to me.
Right.
This didn't
you're
just happen to
sharing
my
the
mom.
story of what happened.
I witnessed it. I heard it. Do you know how fucking hard it is to go against your entire family and stand up for what's right versus what is comfortable or what a little kid would do? No, I had to be a fucking man from age 11 on. And the thing is that I'm literally saying this, and it's knowing full well that if my father wins with his defense team that he's got, my life is over. My life is already over.
It's already
my
done
father's
anyways.
Fucked it. Or he's going to get acquitted. I'm going to go back to his custody, and he's going to make the rest of my life a living hell, or I'm going to be found in a ditch somewhere. That's it. Those are my 2 options, and they both fucking suck. But at least I know, and I sit here today knowing I told the truth, I did what was right, and I didn't fucking back down.
Well, and the person responsible for obviously your mom's life, altering your life, is held accountable. And we've got probably a little less than 10 minutes here, Collier, but.
Sorry, I didn't mean to get so hyped
up. No, dude, no, this is fantastic.
But we all know the details.
Yeah, we know the details. So the details of, and obviously, listen, man, I mean, I know it's still tough, like you said, for you at 44 years old to talk about, and I understand that. But the details on how the case, what the thing was that turned this thing around, all of a sudden we're going to make an arrest, how they found your mom, where they found your mom.
Sure. So where it turned was not only what I said and the fact that they couldn't turn up. My father would tell them something, and I'm no, that's bullshit because she wouldn't have gone there. So my father, had his lawyers dealing with the cops, and whatever he said, then Messmer would be would your mom have gone to Toronto by herself? And I'm like, no. Would your mom like, no, she wouldn't have done that. No, she wouldn't have thrown her credit cards at him. My father's story was like, she came down, threw credit cards at him, and got in a car at the end of the driveway and left. And I'm like, are you fucking kidding? Like, that's the story we're going with, bro? And he says it in court.
Yeah.
And, of course, it's a different story when I confront him in a murder in Mansfield. But there was that. The house was the big turning point, and then the fact that my father wanted to take me out of town on a...
The house in Erie, Pennsylvania.
The house in Erie, Pennsylvania, because that was... So, this is 1990. There's no Google. There's no Zillow. It's not easy to find this stuff. And that's when they found that my father had bought a house, tried to get it for cash... Bought it for cash to try to get in quicker, asked to move in a month earlier, asked about lowering the basement floor because they contacted the realtor. This is how they figured all this out. And that was when they're like, okay, that's super fucking fishy. And then they're asking me about, like, did your father talk about this house? I was like, no. I'm like, I don't know this house other than what is in his truck and that it's his girlfriend in front of this fireplace. I'm like, they're both Polaroids. They're together. Clearly, it's the same thing. And when I would poke holes in whatever his story was. So what happened is that I'm taken into foster care. I'm having that asthma attack, like I said, at night. At the same time, while I'm having this, they go into the house. So David Messmore gets cooperation with Erie PD. You know, they go cross state lines, right? Yeah. That's not an easy thing. You're a cop.
Absolutely.
You know, it's a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
And already his Captain Carnes, has said, if this comes up cold, you're done. Like, that's it. Like, we're screwed. This guy's going to sue us for everything, blah, blah. Again, but he's like, this fucking kid won't leave me alone. I'll take my chances with you, Captain. I won't take my chances with this kid.
Right.
Because I was so convincing, because I was so, as I am now, I'm the same person. And the thing is that they go into the basement, and they're trying to they're looking through the house, and, like, they're not finding anything. And what happened I had told them about my father purchasing some AstroTurf, like indoor-outdoor carpeting, the green shit, whatever.
Yeah.
And it was on our porch for a while, and some tarps and things that were at the house. And I told him they were on our porch. I told Messmore this. So when they went downstairs, they saw this green AstroTurf carpeting. And they're looking around. They're like, fuck, I don't know. And then they're like, they smelled like sort of a weird odor, but they're like, I don't know. And then they point the flashlight on the wall, and they see a couple splatters of what they think is cement. And they're like, get the fucking shovels. They rip everything up because there were shelves built and everything. There's newly painted shelves. And so it had this weird sort of odor, but everything was painted.
And this is the basement of the new house in
Erie, Pennsylvania house, the one that I found the photo of. And they rip up the carpeting, they dig through, and then, they lift it up and they see a grave. And then they dig it up and they pull her body out. And they're like, she's got a plastic bag tied around her neck and the whole thing.
So
my mother was suffocated and bludgeoned to death in the back of her head.
And then driven from Mansfield, Ohio to Erie to this new house your father bought, cut up some concrete,
dropped her in it,
put it, and then try to cover it up.
Yeah. And what conveniently happened, is the girlfriend.
I was just going to ask, was she aware of this? Was she involved?
Uncle, who was partnering with my father on this new business in Erie, Pennsylvania, had conveniently found some leftover concrete dumped on his property and called the police about it.
So he had like a little farm property or some acreage.
Yes.
I do remember that.
So I don't know if this happened. I don't know. Look, there are many people that have these conspiracy theories about all of them being involved and different things like that. And I could go down that rabbit hole if I want. But like at the end of the day, my father caused my mother's murder.
Absolutely.
And committed my mother's murder. Like there's no doubt in my mind.
And if I remember correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm just going off this.
Sure.
One of the few episodes of Forensic Files because it's about the forensics. The concrete splatter that you talked about on the wall.
Yes.
Or even the concrete that was used to, cut up, and replace with, and the concrete that was dumped out on this property, they all matched up. Yep. I remember there was some forensic deal that was done where they were able to compare the chemicals or however these things were made.
Content.
They all matched up. I do remember that.
So it was all circumstantial evidence. So then they found the credit card receipts for the tarp and the AstroTurf, which had been on our porch for a hot minute. I mean, it was purchased months before he murdered
So
my
this
mother.
wasn't a crime of passion.
No, this was not a
well
crime of
planned.
passion. And that's the thing when people watch a murder in Mansfield, they don't get. They're like, "Oh yeah, so he killed her." And I was like, "No,
This was
premeditated.
in the making.
That's what aggravated murder is it's premeditated. That's what they call it in Ohio at the time. It's premeditated. So like he bought the house, asked about lowering the basement floor, asked about like all these things months in advance. Bought the torp, rented a jackhammer to like my father didn't do labor.
Yeah.
But he had done construction growing up in Philadelphia while he was in school. And because our Italian family had a construction business. So there was like all this stuff. And, he, and then he's super sore and he has all these marks and everything. And it's like, my father was not the most common sense person as far as like what he does, couldn't hardly screw in a light bulb, but like when you're trying to like hire that shit and you're like in that zone, oh yeah, you can do anything for sure.
Yeah, yeah. When you're
It was circumstantial evidence, and I was able to tie in all of that circumstantial evidence in a time frame, without me knowing that what their time frame was. So everything I told, it just all lined up because I was telling the truth.
What a concept.
What a concept.
What a concept.
All right,
So-
Collier, we got 2 minutes,
2
man.
minutes.
This is a fascinating story. You've talked to your dad since then.
In the film, yeah, I confront him. And he is, he's a sociopath and he is in denial of his guilt. And I'll just tell you real fast, like when I pitched the idea to the Department of Corrections because they wouldn't let us come in, I was like, this is an opportunity for my father to admit what he's done, and we will have this big come to Jesus moment. It'll be great. So they thought it was going to be this big thing, and they had their photographer there and all this stuff. I didn't tell them that I also know my father's a sociopath because my father thought that I was going with my friend John Morrissey and all these people to make a film to help him get out of prison. So when he comes in the room in the film, he has a smile on his face. And then I pull out this letter that he had sent back to me when I was 13 years old because here's the thing. I got into the film business and I did everything I did because I wanted to fucking have an answer on why you murdered my mother. I had written him a letter when I was 13 years old, and I asked him to please come clean about murdering my mother. Why are you putting everybody through this? Putting your girlfriend through, it was Sherry at the time, your daughter my father had a daughter, was born 12 days before he was arrested, so I had a half-sister, our whole family. I was like, just tell me the truth. I'm just pleading with you to tell me the truth. And he opened the letter, read it, wrote refuse, and returned to sender and sent it back to me. And I read him that letter in prison, right there in front of him, and I say, why did you send that? And it's just all downhill from there. As soon as I pulled that letter out, and I told him, I was like, I've had these questions ever since you murdered my mother, the whole game changes. His whole demeanor drives. And then it's just an hour of conversation, and he's just completely in denial. All these stories, which don't match up, it's insane.
So one last question, Collier. So if I understand it, he still fucking denies doing this.
Yes.
So that's absolutely
Well, he
baffling.
denies, he said that she came at him with a knife. He pushed her. It happened downstairs. She hit her head on this furniture.
He panicked.
And that he panicked. I was
blah.
like, well, it's suffocation. It was the primary cause of death. I was like, how did she get the plastic bag over her head? Oh, I put the plastic bag over her head. I was like, why did you do that? Oh, because I didn't want to look at her. Yeah, while you were strangling her, you didn't want to look at her? Like, you know what I mean? It's just
like you said, narcissist.
And sociopaths and psychopathy, and it's a real thing.
All right, Collier, before we wrap this up, man, how can everybody follow you, find your podcast, find you on the gram, whether they're trying to date you? I want to hear your stories, man.
Hashtag Blue Eyes.
Yeah, hashtag Blue Eyes. So my Instagram and all my social media handles are all at Collier Landry. The podcast that I do is called Moving Past Murder. You can find that at collierlandry.com/podcast. I'm on Apple, Spotify. I also have a YouTube channel, youtube.com/Collier Landry, where I have all the episodes. I release new episodes every single Friday. I talk to cool people like yourselves and like Chris Hansen, who I just interviewed, Tara Newell from Dirty John, Kara Robinson Chamberlain. Yeah, like some dope people. And then I also read my father's letters from prison, which really helps people because I have 500 of them over 30 years. And I open a new letter randomly, and I just read it for the first time live. And it's really cool, and it helps people understand.
Oh, it probably helps even yourself in a way.
That's cool.
All right, Collier, buddy, we do appreciate it, man. It was
Cheers.
great running into you here at
Guys,
CrimeCon.
Salute.
Salute.